One's life begins to change when their desires transform into concrete actions. You're listening to the Desire to Be podcast, where your desires for your life and relationships become your mastery. I'm your host, Devorah Goldberg, and thank you for joining. Welcome to today's episode of the Desire to Be podcast. Today, I have a very special guest on with me. Welcome, Chaz Volk. He is the host of the Bad Jew podcast. First of all, welcome, Chaz.
It's great to be here, and I'm really excited to be on Desire to Be once again, and I'm really grateful you asked me to be on.
Even to this day, I'm intrigued by your brand name, your podcast name, Bad Jew, because in my mind, there is no bad person, there is no bad Jew, but there's so much content that you bring your listeners, and the perspective that you have is so deep and so real. And I thought it's the most appropriate time to have you on now that we're all reflecting on the news that has happened in Israel since October 7th, the news that keeps on coming out of Israel. Tell us, what were your first reactions when you first found out the news of October 7th?
Well, I think like all of us, there's kind of this moment where when you see an anthill and you kick it, you see all the ants scurry into a insane frenzy, unsure of what direction to go because their entire world has literally been rocked. And that's very much how I feel very similarly to how so many other Jews out there have felt, which is rocked and in shock and completely skewed away from normality of life. And something that was very difficult for me to process is that my life was going to be changed for the upcoming weeks to be. I mean, shortly after the shock was gone, it was quickly met by anger and, dare I say, hate. And I think that's a very normal reaction. When the first Shabbat came after the attacks, I finally let myself cry. You know, Shabbat is that separation between the week that was and the week that is to come, that nice pause in between. And in that first week, I really had lost my way. And knowing myself and you know, this is what going to a therapist and, you know, years of spiritual study has taught me is that it's taught me the awareness of who I am and what I do emotionally is I do bottle things up without me even realizing it. And on Shabbat, that was the first time that week that I had cried and let it all out. And
How was that when that happened?
I mean, it was cathartic. I was needed, and I felt like me again for the first time that week. I needed to feel that. The gateway had finally opened up for me and the waterwork started. And that was a return to me, essentially. You know, in some ways, I envy those who have the ability to cry every single day. I wish I had that. I physically have tried to let it out, and my body just doesn't operate that way.
Yeah.
So it's been a very difficult month, not to mention social media, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. You're talking about, you know, the energy that left you when you cried. There's really no, you know, formula when we have to cry, when we have to let it out, when our bodies are bottled up enough that it just wants that energy to flow once again. That's when that person's time is. And you found the right time. And instead of holding that back in, you released it. You have a very special story where you found yourself within Judaism a number of years back. If you can just give us a short, concise version of that story, because you started to embrace Judaism, live proudly as a Jew, and then this attack happened. So I want to merge into that and what that did for you as your identity.
Absolutely. And I'll do my best to keep it short, but essentially, I've always grown up someone who always leaned closer to the cultural Jewish side. Definitely grew up in a conservative shul. Long story short was when I was visiting Israel just over a year ago, it occurred to me in the city of Tzfat, how appropriate. And it occurred to me in the city of Tzfat that I didn't just want to be Jewish, I wanted to do Jewish. And I didn't like living my life so detached from the deeper elements of Judaism that aren't as explored by a wider, more broad, secular Jewish crowd. And that was a part of that crowd. And I realized there was a whole part of me missing. If you could imagine my epiphany, my favorite metaphor for this epiphany is imagine if a superhero lived all their life without exploring their superpowers until a certain point. That's how I felt. is there's a big part of me that I just haven't tapped into that I finally allowed myself to. So I started that journey. And when I came back home to America, what occurred to me, I was looking for podcasts that were Jewish podcasts that I can continue my Jewish learning from. And I found two different types of shows. The first type of show is what I like to call the rabbi with the microphone kind of show. And that's where the rabbi records a sermon or a program that they did, and then they repurpose it into a podcast. And that's great. There's the other thing that pops up when you type in Jewish on Apple Podcasts, and that is what I like to call two stoners with a microphone. And that's really just two Jewish comedians who happen to be Jewish doing Jewish humor while getting high on the microphone. Mm-hmm. So I wanted something that would lean closer to the rabbi side, but something that was in the middle. So I created a podcast where the host is learning from authority leaders from across the world, like yourself, Devorah, because you're one of those leaders that's on the show, that comes on and teaches me a certain concept. And the questions of the podcast are from people within my community. I've created a Bad Jew WhatsApp community where people can come on, ask questions, and engage and get resources related and not related to the podcast that are related to Judaism. So it's been a really wonderful hub for learning as well as exploration. And we've certainly gotten some interesting characters on the Bad Jew WhatsApp community. But ultimately, what we have is a safe space to ask any question you want, judgment-free.
Yeah. And you have this way of, because I'm part of this group as well, as you know, and you have a way of just keeping everyone in the middle line. You give people space to express themselves on either side, either to the right and the left. And then you just have this beautiful way of keeping it just mainstream, mainline, positive. Come on, guys, let's give each other blessings. Let's give each other words of Torah, and just reminding each other that this is the Jewish way.
Wow. Thank you for that. When we first created the WhatsApp community, my fear was if we just let everyone speak freely, then it can turn into a crazy trolling space. It's very hard to maintain that. So one thing that I decided, if we're going to let everyone just comment whenever they want to, there has to be guidelines to that. So when people go on and express anything, there are two kind of qualifiers they have to put on before their statement, either a learning opportunity where they are seeking answers to their question, or what we call just venting, which is a place just to vent about valid feelings that you have, judgment free. So we have different rules like that in our chat that help people understand that there are certain ways to react to the kind of content that people are putting out there. But I want to thank you, Devorah. That's really sweet of you. And I'm grateful for your participation as well. One thing Devorah has done for my WhatsApp community is she has done virtual meditations with our group a few different times now. And it's been totally welcomed. And it's been a really amazing experience to see what people have taken from your meditations and your guided spiritual journey. So thank you, Devorah. It really means so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. I want to go back to your story from Israel. So you said you were on this beautiful spiritual journey, and then you came back to America. You went back to LA. What changed about you during that time, or once you came back?
I mean, I learned more about Judaism in those 10 days in Israel than I had in my entire life. And that was
only 10 days. Okay.
It was only a 10-day Israel trip. And, you're also talking to the guy who went to Hebrew school. You're talking to the guy who was bar mitzvahed. You're talking to a guy who has been pretty actively involved in his Jewish community since he was a kid. I participated in Hillel as an intern. I was going to Aish Lit, which is the group that took me to Israel, but I started going to Aish Lit in 2018. That's a fledgling of Aish Torah. They're based in the Pico Robertson area, and they're a wonderful couple that have led so many to closer to Hashem. And then when I took that Israel trip, I think I learned more about Judaism in those 10 days. And in doing so, I started adopting more practices and more rituals into my life. Things like wearing the kippah every single day. That was like one of the first big steps, is wearing that kippah. Because there was a point in the middle of my trip where I felt naked without it. And then I remember just about every day on that trip, we would wrap tefillin, or if you ever visited the wall, you would wrap tefillin. And that was a ritual I didn't want to stop just because I was back in America. So the first thing I did was I called up my rabbi and I said, hey, because he was still in Israel, hey, can you pick up a tefillin for me? I'll pay for it. Just please send it. He says, actually, there's people in the Pico Robertson community who will just pay for it for you. Meet one of them at the Mezuzah Center in Pico Robertson, and we'll go do that. So this man, it turned out to be the rabbi's brother.
Mm-hmm.
The rabbi's brother and I met up at the Mezuzah Center in Pico Robertson. And inside the store, he confirmed that I knew how to wrap tefillin, and then also ran me through the prayer of the Shema. So that's where my davening started. That was my yeshiva at the Mezuzah Center. More like a Shema boot camp, but
Yeah, I love that.
yeah. And then I started eating kosher style, and people might ask me, well, why aren't you just eating full kosher? And the truth of the matter is, I have a few selfish reasons for why I don't eat full on kosher. I'm kosher style currently, and that's because it's still something I'm getting used to, and I'm practicing it. It's the same way that when you go to the gym, you don't start with 180-pound bench press. You start with the base weight. And so this is me starting with the base weight. This is me taking an entryway into that journey. And I'm not planning for myself to get to have a fully kosher lifestyle. I want that journey to be organic. And if it makes sense emotionally and intellectually for me to start eating full on kosher, then I will do it.
And that's what I want my audience to appreciate about you, Chaz, is that you take things to heart and you take your steps towards a connection to God. You're on your journey and you feel what's right for you in your next step. Do you know someone who's stressed? Or rather, do you know someone who's not stressed? Stress is a normal part of life. The only time that it's not normal is when we hold on to the stressful emotions within. These emotions may look like resentment, worry, anger, or frustration, all of which don't usually just pass us by. They tend to settle within our bodies, attaching itself to an organ for comfort or for control, until this organ retaliates and protests, for it wants to function without the weight of the stress within. In my 15-minute guided meditations, I guide my clients to identify a stress that they're holding on to within and release it. Just let go. Allow the pain to dissipate out of their bodies and be left with calm, with inner peace, and with ease. As a listener of the Desire to Be podcast, my gift to you is a free 15-minute guided meditation while spots are still available. DM me on Instagram at its.devoragoldberg to claim your free session now. So back to your story, you came back from Israel, you started donning a kippah, you wrapped tefillin every day, and that's really the core of the expression of a Jew. People now, since what happened on October 7th, are scared. Some people are scared to walk around looking as proud Jews. Maybe they'll cover up their kippah. Maybe they won't wrap up tefillin in the airport like they used to do. They'll do it in the side room. People's mezuzahs sometimes are being vandalized. How has this had an effect on you, if any, since you're been coming out as a proud Jew, but now, oh no, the world's judging us and there's so much anti-Semitism around?
I personally am no stranger to anti-Semitism. There's been a few cases in my life where I certainly have faced anti-Semitism. I faced a very traumatic vandalism in middle school where a couple of kids from the high school had come and broken into my locker and wrote some pretty awful things in that. I also have been known for my lawsuit, Volk versus CSU Board of Trustees, which happened at San Francisco State. And that's where we sued San Francisco State for its systemic anti-Semitism, this time coming from the extreme left. So anti-Semitism is not something I'm like, it's not foreign to me. I've dealt with it all my life, unfortunately. However, right now, this is a particularly unique time. We're dealing with statistics that we haven't seen since the Holocaust. And we're seeing justice systems fail to bring aggressors to justice. And we're talking about internationally. And we're in very disturbing times that I think challenge our mental health and challenge our spiritual health. And for me, the primary anti-Semitism that I've experienced in this time has been on social media. And this is especially apparent on my Bad Jew content. I've been posting a lot of content since everything happened on October 7th on Simchat Torah. All of my content has shifted to being about Israel and how it might relate to some Jewish study, but ultimately about what we as a Jewish community can do right now. We acknowledge the spiritual war. We acknowledge the literal war. We acknowledge the political climate in America. We acknowledge the information war that's happening on social media. And I'll tell you right now that I've gotten some of the most appalling comments on my content, and I'm trying to delete it. It's not because I'm trying to censor it. It's because these are people that you can't have a dialogue with. It's
Yeah.
negativity that isn't needed, that I think if people see it will ultimately detract and stay away from my content for. And I want to discourage those people from engaging with my content, because at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is harm me. And I'll be honest, they're being successful at it. They're successfully harming me because it is impacting my mental health. But they are not going to successfully tear me down. That's something that they'll never do. So I have to be just as relentless as they will. I like Bob Marley's quote where someone shot him, and on the same day that an assassination attempt was made on him, he still performed, or he insisted on performing. At least I can't remember if he did perform, but the bottom line is, when they asked him, why would you still want to perform, he says, well, if evil never wants to rest, why should I? So the content that I'm putting out there, I don't want to rest from putting it out there. We can't. For the hostages' sake, for the 1,400 murdered sake, for the IDF's sake, for the people across the world, for the Jews across the world who live in smaller communities that feel vulnerable right now, have to keep on doing it for their sake.
Yeah. It sounds like you've really strengthened yourself in face of all this is happening, and in face of the attacks on you, and people don't agree with you. It's like you said, information war and social media. It's not stopping you in any way.
No, and I will also say that it's not stopping the Jewish community in any way. You know, there's the concept of kavanah, there's the concept of intention. And one thing that's been amazing is that I've been involved in more weddings during this period than I have in my entire life. And all of those weddings have acknowledged what is happening in Israel and what's happening in the world, and how despite all of that, we're still here. And it's incredible to see how it's in a weird way, getting married has become part of the war effort, or going to shul is becoming part of the war effort, or simply wearing a kippah, or putting out Jewish content, or simply even just leaving a comment, or simply just waking up and trying that prayer for the first time in your life is a part of that war effort. I've gotten a lot of hateful comments on social media, but I've also gotten a lot of positive comments on social media. And there are a lot of people out there that it might be hard to see, but I want people to know that there are people that are not even within our religion, non-Jews, that are siding with Israel, that stand in solidarity with us. It might be harder to find sometimes. It's hard. It's hard to see sometimes. But I'm telling you right now that it is absolutely a reality, that there are other communities out there that support us. Just the other week, I saw the New Zealand tribe people who were practicing the haka, and they did the haka for Israel, which was amazing. That incredible slap and like knee and shout, the super masculine war chant they do from their ancient times, that they still, the Maori war chant, the haka, it's badass. Okay, that's still going on. But there was, I've seen tribes in Africa who have been praying for Israel as well. That's been amazing. Christians and Buddhists and people from India have been reaching out, saying that they stand in solidarity. They send their sympathies our way, which is amazing. But there was one comment in particular that has really stuck out to me. That's been really amazing. And this is someone I really hope joins the Bad Jew WhatsApp community one day. Someone commented on my content. I made content about how I traveling decided to wear a hat. And I actually wore my Bad Jew merch on top of my kippah. So I was wearing my kippah, but under it I was wearing a hat that said Hashem is dope. And I wore that hat because non-Jews really don't know who Hashem is. So it's kind of my dog whistle to other Jews that I am Jewish. But I was wearing it, and I made a comment about how I have to wear this hat now because of the jihad that was called on Jews. And one person commented, I've been very afraid for my husband. My husband is a non-Jew. Sorry, I am a non-Jew, but my husband is Jewish, where it's an interfaith marriage. And since this war has started, my husband has started to get closer to Hashem and has started to practice more. And I'm really supportive of his decisions and his efforts, but I'm scared for him. And so that's a Jew who has never fully embraced their Judaism until just now. And so what Hamas didn't bargain for, and what Iran didn't bargain for, and what Hezbollah didn't bargain for, and what the Houthis didn't bargain for, is that their violent actions would spark not just any kind of anger, hostility, and how we feel, but also a religious awakening. So I want to congratulate our oppressors, our enemies, on inspiring this community to get closer to God. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of war efforts have been focused on the spiritual aspect, as you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of people feel the fear. A lot of people fear the uncertainty. They fear, turning left and right. A few weeks ago, I decided I was going to try to spread light in my community, and I was in Trader Joe's and I was asking people if they're Jewish, if they want to light Shabbat candles. And I asked one lady, "Are you Jewish?" And it took her like a full minute to answer me, yes. She said, "I'm scared to say that I'm Jewish." And there are many different ways that we can use our spirituality to help the war effort. Is there any specific mitzvah that you've connected to, that you've wanted to work on yourself or encourage others to do to help this war?
I think the easiest, lowest barrier of entry activity that people can partake in to participate in this war effort, especially if you're not accustomed to, practicing the rituals of Judaism, is go to a Shabbat dinner, light those candles, say the blessing over the wine. And if you don't know it, go ahead, open Google. Don't do it the way that don't keep Shabbat in the traditional way. Go ahead and open Google and look up the brachas and the prayers, and just start there. It's on Friday night. It starts at Friday night and ends Saturday night. Okay. And I think by just starting there, it's a nice gateway into a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, and this is again my belief on the organic journey of Judaism. Take it from a guy who eats kosher style, not full on kosher. Do what makes the most sense to you emotionally, what seems easy. Aim for the low hanging fruit first in terms of ritual practice. Start small. And if you want a very easy way to try out prayer, this was advice that I was given years ago before I had, had this new reinvigorated Jewish journey of mine. The rabbi that led me on my Israel trip, way before I ever went to Israel for the third time, he gave me the advice: if you don't know how to pray, start with saying out loud 3 things that you are grateful for and 3 things that you forgive.
Beautiful.
And that is a fantastic way to start prayer.
That's fantastic. I would add to that. I think that when people want to forgive, it's harder for them because they feel like they need to bring justice to the other person, to the other side. One person asked me in one of my group meditations, they said, "How can I forgive Hamas?" And I said, "You don't have to forgive Hamas, but you can release Hamas. Anything that's hard for you to forgive, you can release, because as long as you're thinking about them, as long as you're holding on to this feeling of, oh, I'm irritated, they should be brought to justice and they're not, just let it out of your body." So even just the word release, what am I releasing these days? I find that for myself, it's also so invigorating, and it just brings a feeling of peace.
Well said. Well said. On that note, I just want to add to that part of the terrorist's job out there is to inspire anger and hate within us. Because what's going to happen is, if there's enough anger and hate within us, we're going to go and wrongfully attack them wherever they are. And then what they're going to do is they're going to film that moment, and then they're going to put on social media, "Violent Jew attacks pro-Palestinian supporter."
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is they look like the good guy.
Yeah.
And that's right now their biggest struggle, is looking like the good guy. And they need to incite as much violence as possible in order to incite some kind of reaction from us. So the act of releasing anger and ridding of evil, I think, is just so important right now. And I would say the best ways to do that is for rituals like Shabbat, that moment to pause and just have a dinner and be in your community.
Yes.
I'll also say, talk to a rabbi about these feelings. The rabbi will be helpful. I also think seeing a therapist or taking a meditation from Devorah herself, a
Oh,
guided
yes,
meditation, will help with
absolutely.
that tremendously.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just as we wrap up here, as you know, the name of this podcast is Desire to Be. What would you say your desire for your podcast, the Bad Jew podcast, is in moving forward as you inspire other Jews like yourself, or even anyone in this world? What's your next step? What is your desire for your podcast? Perhaps what is your desire for yourself, or what is your desire for the world at large at this time?
It's a great question. Thank you. I get asked questions a lot because I also produce podcasts for a living. This is what I do. It's not just my podcast. If you go on mrthrive.com, you'll see all of the different shows that we produce and more, and also all the other services that we produce in the organic marketing space. But when it comes to my desire to be, my desire is simply to learn. That's actually why I created the podcast, for the selfish need, the selfish desire to learn. People have asked me what creates a successful podcast. And I think this goes for creating successful content in general. The people who are creating successful content created it because they genuinely wanted to do it. Viewers know when content creators are making something just for views.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you work the algorithms right, and if you do the clickbait just great enough, anyone can get 1,000 followers, right? However, I think success for content is a side effect of being happy with what you're creating. So I think my goal is really just to be happy with what I'm creating and putting out there. And I'm very happy with the podcast that I've created. I'm very inspired by Bad Jew and what I've been able to foster with it, the community that I've been able to create with it. Mm-hmm. So my desire to be learning, that's really my desire. And if a side effect comes with a sponsorship or a partnership with an organization, if a side effect is growing it and being able to bring on stronger world leaders from across the Jewish community onto the show, I'll take those success. I'll take that success any day. But my immediate goal is really to create content that helps me learn and helps others learn.
That's beautiful. It sounds to me like you're on this journey and you're magnetizing yourself for your community to join you in your learning process. And I love that. How can people listen to your podcast, Chaz?
Absolutely. So we are on all listening platforms and on YouTube. If you type in Bad Jew, you'll see me with tefillin kind of hanging off my head as if it fell off my head. That is the Bad Jew brand. And you could also go to our website, badjew.co. That is not com, but co, C-O. There you can also find our merch. All the profits on our merch store go to supporting the IDF or go to security here in Los Angeles for my Jewish community. So I've actually been able to sponsor security in our immediate community with the merchandise that I've sold, which is pretty cool.
That is so touching.
Yeah, thank you.
Amazing, Chaz. That is, I didn't know that was the side effect of your merch. That is beautiful how you use it to help and support others. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your ideas, really sharing your heart with us. Guys, connect with Chaz, listen to his podcast. Great content comes out every single week. Again, thanks, Chaz, for doing this, and just lots of peace to you and best of luck to everything that you do moving forward. What a great episode. Thank you for being here. I truly, truly appreciate you. I'd love for you to tap 5 stars and let me know what resonated. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn under my name, Devorah Goldberg. That's where I give you more content. That's where we're able to engage even further. Until next episode, stay safe and be well.